everybody feels this way at some point, whether they want to admit it or not. But admitting it helps you heal and helps other people feel less alone.
Someone cares about you.
There's a reason why your heart is beating.
You still have a purpose.
Don't give up.
It's important to know that you're not alone.
You're not alone.
You're not alone. You are not alone.
Thank you for tuning into the 1 Mile, 1 Veteran podcast, where we hope you take this opportunity to get moving while you hear from others who face difficulties and come out the other side stronger. And being of service is one great way to overcome our difficulties and solve many of our problems. And that's exactly what our guest Michelle Lang did when she and her husband faced tremendous difficulties as he was transitioning from military service to being a reservist. Michelle is now the founder of Veteran Help Point and an inspiring woman who is dedicated to connecting small-town veterans with vetted resources, building community support, and advocating for mental health, all while being an active mom and supportive spouse. Michelle, I'm so honored to have you here on the 1 Mile, 1 Veteran podcast, finally.
I'm super honored to be here. I love talking to you guys.
Well, it's been a pleasure meeting you this past year in November, and then really connecting through social media and following your journey. And for our listeners, as they begin their walk with their Strava app, I'd love to hear about how your journey began. How did you and your husband meet, and what eventually led to you to becoming married?
So funny. We have a very funny meeting story. It's like, I don't even know why we kept dating. So
oh gosh.
He's from the same town that I went to college in. So I married a townie, essentially. So like, that was like a no-no. But I was still friends with people that worked at the college, and he was home on block leave. And I don't like say this often, but honestly, we swiped right. Okay, so we were in the same vicinity on Tinder. Okay. Which he was at Fort Drum. So like we never would have met had he not been home in that little radius. So the first time that we met, we talked, and he was like very funny. And I'm like, don't send me any inappropriate pictures because I will hang up, on that. So he ended up sending me, he's like, anyway, he ended up sending me a picture of Dick Cheney. And I thought that was hilarious. I was like, that was good. That was very punny. That was hilarious. So we met at this dive bar in town, and it really like teed up, now that I look back at it, like for the rest of our life, because he pretty much like was trying to pay attention to me, but there was a veteran in there who had, he had been blown up and was not, he was struggling, and he was reaching out to Chris because he knew Chris was in the military and they could connect and talk. And I was just there like, I don't know anything about this, but he's helping him, whatever. A UFC fight was on TV, and it was the women's UFC fight. And I'm sorry to all women UFC fighters out there. I cannot stand to watch women fighting. So I'm like, this is miserable. I don't like it. So that was pretty much like the rest of our lives. And then date 2 and 3 got even kind of worse from there, but in like the most comical way. I'll tell you that story another time. It ended up like I ended up having the fire police called to my house because I lived above a funeral home, and I set the fire alarm off. I accidentally walked into the embalming room. I mean, it was crazy. Basically our life has been a mess from the get-go, but here we are today.
That's awesome. And you guys met at like such a young age, right? Weren't you like fresh out of college or something, and he was kind of new to the military?
I think I was 22 when we met, and I met like the day, oh my gosh, we met like on the 27th of June, and his birthday is the 28th. And I was like, really? Are you serious? Today's your birthday? So yeah, I think he was 26 and I was 22 when we met.
Oh, wow. And with that kind of like chaotic early dating period, what was it like for you? Like what was the proposal like? And then what was it like to then become a military spouse at such a young age? Because a lot of military spouses start their journey when they're 17, 18, 22 years old.
Mm-hmm. We dated long distance for 8 months, and he lived about 6 hours away from me. And so he would come down regularly. I would visit him up in Fort Drum. Fort Drum is a really small base, so we never went on base. I never, like, when we were there, it was not military at all. Like, it was just him and I. Do you know what I mean? Whereas, like, down here at Fort Bragg, it's hard not to be immersed in the military culture. So I really didn't know what I was getting into. But yeah, we dated for about 8 months, and then I actually decided to move in with him and like quit my job, which was devastating because I literally had just had a meeting with the CEO and my boss, and they were building this big wellness center, this like multi-million-dollar wellness center. And he offered me to be like the director of the wellness center at 22. I think I was 23 at the time. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Like, yes, this is what I want to do. I was like implementing community programs, meeting community needs basically. And I could do so much more with this. And what amazing opportunity. And I had to leave that meeting, follow my CEO back into his own office and say, I got to tell you something. Like, I'm not the person for this job because I've actually just decided to move to New York. And that was soul crushing. Because then that led to a lot of depression and resentment in Chris and I's relationship, because I really, really struggled to find a meaningful job in Fort Drum. I was strung along a lot by some people, and promises were not made. And so it was devastating to leave something fulfilling and walk into nothing. That caused a lot more resentment and really animosity in my heart than what I admitted or was willing to see at the time. But I was very unhappy. So it was pretty tumultuous, and we spent a lot of our time. I spent a lot of my time in the gym. That saved me greatly because I was pretty depressed. I was really, really depressed. I was having like body dysmorphia issues. I checked myself back into therapy, and we partied a lot. We went out and drank a lot, and it was just kind of like masking the pain of feeling worthless.
Yeah, that's I get chills because that's so much of what happens with a lot of military spouses is you have to give up a life to support your spouse, because the military even tells you like your family didn't come in your sea bag. And so, everything has to be geared towards supporting the active duty member. And I'm so glad that you brought up like the resentments and the partying and kind of like the masking of the symptoms. So how did you move forward in that life?
It all had to fall apart. It all fell apart. And that's when I literally had to come to Jesus meeting, and like, God literally told me like, you need to turn to me or I'm going to turn away from you. And it was terrifying. We were at like the lowest point at our life up until that point. And I was 7 months pregnant with my first son. We were in Fort Benning. Chris that was the first time I've really seen him struggle with his mental health. I was calling him every day on the way to work to make sure he didn't crash his car and kill himself. It was one of the most terrifying experiences, but it all just had to fall apart for us to like, whoa, do some serious reevaluations. And ever since then, so like, 2017, late 2017, 2018, it's just been a continuous journey of growth.
That's so good, because obviously where you're at right now, helping people, committed your life to continuously growing. It usually takes a journey to get there. And so you're pregnant with your first child, and obviously the military life isn't necessarily working out for you guys. And from what I understand, Chris decided to get out of the military at one point. What led to that decision, and how'd you guys begin making that transition?
So he got orders to go to Fort Benning to do the captain's career course. And when he was at Fort Drum, he had taken the test to become a warrant officer. tested extremely high. Like, I believe it was one of the highest scores that you could receive. And he was a shoo-in. He was infantry at the time. And I don't know if you remember, during that time, there were a lot of pink slips that were being given. They were really paring down the military specifically for officers. And one of the generals was, I don't know. Anyway, he was like, we can't afford to lose an infantry officer. And so he pulled his packet. And so Chris still had to go down to the captain's career course. And while he was at the captain's career course, he was like, hey, just so you know, like, I'm waiting. I'm not going to finish this. I'm going to switch over to warrant officer. They were like, what are you talking about? No, you're not. And he's like, yeah, my packet's in. Like, he had 2 letters of recommendations from a general and a colonel, like saying like, yes, he should go. His test scores were very high. And they said, no, your packet's been pulled. And so whenever he was down and he got that news, and he's like, are you kidding? So that was like the first big blow to him, and just realizing like he kind of really has no control over his life. He was unhappy in the infantry. He had busted his hip in Ranger School. He was not going to, if he had to go down that infantry path, he was not going to, there was no longevity there because he didn't have a Ranger tab. So he made the decision. They sent us to Fort Irwin, California. And he was like, why would I do that to my family? There's no longevity here for me. I want to do this for the rest of my life. And I'm just going to go there and basically get dirt on my face and put my family through hell for nothing. And so he made the decision to get out and transition. I mean, he had probably about like 3 or 4 months left when he decided that. And so it just like very rapidly made a decision. We pivoted and we figured out what we needed to do.
Wow. And during this whole time, I mean, you guys are still working through the other issues that had come up, because obviously like the birth of your first child doesn't solve problems. If anything, it puts a magnifying glass to the relationship and the things that you're already experiencing. I'm sure your career was probably difficult to continue managing while you're trying to deal with his injuries and mental health issues. How'd you end up working through all of these different factors leading up to this and have, I don't want to say a successful transition, but a truncated transition that kept you both moving forward in a way?
I am really lucky to be very close with my family. He ended up getting a job back in Pennsylvania, where we're both from. And I think whenever you're in the military in this life, you just kind of think like, no matter what, we're going to figure it out. So that was kind of our attitude. Like, it doesn't matter. We're going to figure it out. But the nice thing is we're going to be back in Pennsylvania, where we have a support system. We've never had a support system before, like, in close proximity. What could go wrong? We have people to babysit, we have things. It's fine. And one of my really good friends that I met down there, she was a big source of support, her and I, for each other. We had support and we had each other. And it was a lot of me trying to get him to believe in himself, because, I mean, looking back now, I could see the writing on the wall. Like, he didn't believe in himself as a civilian at all. He had, up until that point, he had not successfully been a civilian in his life. Like, high school was difficult for him. The only thing that was easy or natural to him was being a soldier. And he was worried about being a civilian, but he was putting on a brave face because he was the breadwinner. My job, I went down to working like a little bit more than part-time. I had a remote job through a family insurance agency, which fantastic. They really went out of their way to support me, and let me work remotely when I left Fort Drum. So that was good. We just weren't tuned in enough. Like, we were just keeping everything at the surface, and we didn't know how to have those difficult conversations like we do now.
Yeah, the transition for myself, I remember, I got out as an enlisted individual, so I had no education at the time, and my clear goal was to go back to college, which was easy to identify of like, this is what I'm doing after service. And during this time, I was also dealing with some mental health treatments and stuff like that. And my disability came back, which was very low. But when I graduated college, I had no clue what I was going to do. So, the job aspect was very, very hard for me, that I started looking back at military service, trying to find a way to get back in. And I remember not talking to my wife, Leanne, about that until I had answers, because I felt like I needed to kind of come to a determination to be the not the breadwinner, but the decision maker in our home as to like what direction we're going to head, because it's my duty as a man to care for the family. That's what I grew up learning. That's what I heard other people talk about. Like, this is the man's responsibility to make sure that the family is taken care of. That's our sole purpose, which meant that decisions had to come from us. And, I remember when I first talked to Leanne about it, I was very disappointed because of my disabilities. I no longer qualified for military service. And her initial response was, why were you even looking? So, when it came to and that opened the door for us having conversations about the profession and really what my mental health meant for us moving forward. When she saw me rudderless, directionless, not knowing where to go, that she was able to start speaking into my life and the strengths and kind of guide me along the path that led me to where we're at now.
Mm-hmm.
How did you end up coming alongside and hopefully, helping Chris move forward while still maintaining a semblance of your sanity and raising your growing family?
Sanity is really not anywhere found. It's really difficult for us, just because like, I have always seen so much potential in Chris. He's so smart. He's so kind. I've literally watched him give the shirt off his back to somebody. Like, he has more than once stopped in a rainstorm to help somebody change their tire on the side of the road. Like, he's so kind. He's so passionate. He's so smart, and he's such a good leader, and he cares so much about his soldiers. Getting him to see that has always been the difficult part, because he's really, whenever what you experience when you're younger, not having people believe in you, that sticks with you for the rest of your life. And I think that's very true for all of us. And so that is what I always had tried to overcome, that obstacle with him, which I think we're making headway on now. But that could be very, very frustrating, because I would often say it's not like we're not living in the same reality. So how did I get him to see my reality or glance into his whenever, when he was depressed? It just wasn't true. Like, that wasn't the reality. What I had to end up doing was just put myself in therapy, especially after he transitioned out. I was like, I don't know how to do this. I was grappling with the thought of raising my family alone, whether that meant he was alive or we were, divorced, or he was dead. That's where we were at. And that's my thought process. I very much had to treat him like a ghost in the house until I could get myself together enough to be what he needed to be. Because I realized, he might be struggling, but I also need to take ownership in this too. And I might not be what's best for him right now. So I need to figure out how to do that and what that looks like. So I put myself into therapy. we reached out to, his friends. And then it kind of like all came together where he was able to, get a hand up from people that understood. We were able to go to therapy together. And then we were able to have a guided discussion so that way we could talk in a constructive way and understand what was going on and kind of get a game plan to fix it.
Mm. So it sounds like you really started looking at yourself going, I need to be healthy so I can help him be healthy, regardless of what that looked like. That's such a healthy way to look at things. So often people are trying to control the situation for the other person, and we're not realizing our own, like the impact that our own actions are having on the world around us. So that's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a control freak. I know that I am. So the only thing that I could control is myself. I mean, and that's what I tell so many people too, is the only thing you can control is yourself. You might have lost your job, or you might have trouble finding a job, but you can still choose to get up and brush your teeth. You can still choose to get up and walk a mile. You can choose to do things that are going to enrich your life a little bit every day, whether it's like read a book or meditate. It doesn't have to be big, but you still have control over yourself, and you need to make sure you maintain control over yourself, because you're going to stay stuck in the mud if you don't.
Absolutely. I mean, and when we talk about the control over ourselves, it's more so the control over our actions, because I mean, even for myself, there are times where I have no control over my emotions or my thoughts, but I can still act a certain way. And that those acts can either make me healthier or make me sicker. And so when you started acting in a healthier way for you, how did that affect your husband?
I was hard on him. I will say, like, I was hard. It would drive me nuts because I didn't understand that point of view. I didn't understand where he was at, and I couldn't reach him in that place. So it led to a lot of anger on my part, frustration, and he definitely felt that, but he also multiplied it. And so that working on myself and focusing on myself and my kid, because at this time I was also pregnant with kid number 2. So I exercised a lot. I was really healthy physically, and getting healthier mentally and helping our marriage just like wherever I could, even though it was kind of like I was in a marriage with a half of a person. We were still able to kind of find each other again and work through things, because then just a couple months later, he deployed and he was gone for about a year.
Oh, wow. Gosh.
Yeah. He signed up for a deployment without telling me.
Yeah. How'd that end up coming about? And, obviously, like you come on these podcasts and you talk about openly about, the most difficult stuff that you guys have gone through. Obviously you keep some of the stuff more intimate and more detailed between the two of you, but you share quite a lot about the relationship, the transition, and what motivated you to start Veteran Help Point. So how did you end up going from living with half a person to being able to say in a public space, hey, hun, I'm going to talk about this hard stuff. And, he's now back active duty, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How did that transition occur, and how is that going? Because he's such a supportive husband. Like, he's showing up on your social media and saying, yeah, this was our reality.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, we're not alone. Like, that's the thing. And that's the thing that, we all are trying to tell each other, right? It's like, we are not alone. You are not, what you're experiencing, you're not unique. You're not, this little snowflake that is just beautiful and unique. Everybody feels this way at some point, whether they want to admit it or not, but admitting it helps you heal and helps other people feel less alone. So, I mean, you're always going to, like, whenever you speak out, you're always going to have people that are negative or whatever. And I very much like, that's a reflection on them, not on me, not on us. But that just kind of shows the growth that you can have whenever you start to heal. And whenever you join the military, there are so many people who join the military because they are trying to fill a void in their life. Like, so, whether it's, a poor childhood or bullying, or they don't have family, it's usually some type of childhood wound. And I don't want to say usually, maybe you have a military family, but there are a lot of people that are wounded kids in the military right now.
Absolutely.
And if you can't acknowledge that, you can't heal. And if you can't heal, your marriage suffers. Your you as a parent, that's suffering. You're creating those wounds for your kids too. The cycle continues. If you're a leader, your soldiers are suffering. Your airmen are suffering. Whatever it is, but like, at some point, you have to recognize that to be the leader you want to be, you've got to heal yourself.
Yeah. I was very, very fortunate throughout my 11 and a half year military career prior to the medical conditions that led to me getting discharged. But one of the things that I've always appreciated about the military is we have a mental health branch. Like, that's a part of the services that are offered. And then for veterans, we're continuing to expand access to care. But I know in a lot of areas or commands, mental health services either aren't prioritized or they're not talked about enough. So we don't know what's actually available. Like, it's like one of those things of like, we don't know what we don't know. So we don't even know that we should be looking. So how did, obviously for you, you had the support of your family, the local community, and were able to use your health insurance to get help when you needed it. But how did that work out for a reservist service member, because they don't have access to all of the medical resources offered by the VA, nor do they have access to all of the medical resources offered by the military?
Mm-hmm.
So like you're kind of in this limbo space.
So that is one of the reasons, that was one of the catalysts as to Chris feeling very resentful towards really the military, which made him feel terrible because that's what he loved. When he got out, he went to the VA to seek help, and they told him, no, you don't qualify. And he's like, what do you mean? Like, I served my country for 8 years on active duty. And it wasn't like, no, here's what you should go do instead. It was just, no. And that crushed him. And it crushes a lot of people. And that like starts sowing the seed of bitterness. And so I had to find my own way. I knew that you could use psychologytoday.com to find places, and you can, filter it by your insurance. So that's what I did for us. Ended up finding him somebody that was awful and could not relate to veteran, military service, nothing. So it actually made it worse. So that's why I ended up seeing my own therapist to try and like deal with all this, because he stopped seeing that therapist. But now there's so many online, like the good thing about COVID is that so many things are online now. So right now there's a ton of options for reservists to use that they don't even need their insurance for. Even active duty military, you don't need to go through TRICARE. You can use these resources and they're free and confidential. Like Give an Hour, Sound Off, the Cohen Clinic. There's so many things that you can do, that you can reach out to. No matter where you are, if you need help, it's there for you, whether you're a reservist, National Guard, active duty, a military spouse, whatever.
And that's what is absolutely amazing about a lot of either the nonprofits or non-government organizations that are out there to support the public, whether veteran or active duty or civilian as well. There are so many resources out there once you start scratching the surface. And I love how resourceful you are, because prior to becoming a military spouse, you were already a dedicated person in the healthcare field that was already very resourceful in what you do and finding things for other people to get involved with. That you've now gone on to start your own nonprofit that helps consolidate a lot of these resources, starting from what I understand, in the more remote areas of America first, starting in the East Coast. Would you mind talking a little bit about what Veteran Help Point is and what it's doing?
Mm-hmm. So we're focusing more on rural America, sort of like the underserved populations where you can look around and see farm fields, but you're not going to see a brick and mortar vet center or a VA. And you couldn't even throw a stone at one if you did. So we're creating a database where you can search by zip code. You can see what type of help is around you, whether it's virtual or, a lot of organizations, they might say that they're like X, Y, and Z. But if you dig into them, they have a veteran branch. So upon looking at it, like Google isn't going to bring that up for you. But if you dig a little bit, you're going to find that. So we're bringing those things to light based on 9 categories of help. So everybody has the opportunity to take care of themselves holistically, top to bottom: mental health, financial aid, financial literacy, primary care, raising awareness that, hey, you can see a doctor in your community with community care, legal benefits, housing. So like, prevent homelessness, or if you need a reputable person to walk you through a VA loan, or somebody that understands, military realtors, things like that, just being understood. And I specifically feel like rural veterans they're not understood. And so we are trying to let them know there's support there, but also teach communities how to better support their rural veterans by showing up and, more than just hanging a banner on Main Street, guiding them to these resources that are available to them.
Absolutely. And, one of the things about researching in this capacity, looking for the resources that we will someday need, I want to encourage our listeners, like if you're somebody that's interested in some of these resources, start doing the research when you're not in a crisis, when you don't need the resource, because that helps you be a little bit more objective when asking the questions. And then you can kind of, and correct me on this, but like when we're reaching out and searching for these resources, we can call, say, a local clinic and ask, do you have any resources available, or do you know of anybody that's available for veteran services? Would that be kind of accurate on how we go about finding these services if we're in a rural area and it's not yet on Veteran Help Point?
Mm-hmm. My number one thing is go get on Google and search County Veteran Service Officer for your state. And then it'll bring up your state. There are some states where they might only have one for the state, like very rural areas. I think like Utah and Idaho, they're still working on that. But County Veteran Service Officers, if you can Google that, find yours for your county, they know they have like the pulse on the veteran resources that are going to be most significant to you. They might not have like the holistic resources that can benefit you or all the virtual resources there, but they're going to know what's near in your county or a neighboring county that can assist you.
Thank you so much, because this is a tool that can potentially save somebody's life. Go check out veteranhelppoint.com and start seeing if your area is listed on on Michelle's website. If it's not, reach out to Michelle and let her know what you're in need of, or let her know of resources that she's found, because you're also very good at vetting these resources and making sure that they're legitimate and non-predatory.
Yeah, and we're in the middle of a rebrand right now. So we are changing a lot of things: logo, look, feel, everything. We're in the process of integrating a new map technology. And with that is going to be the more robust database. So come June, which will line up with our event, Operation Honor, we're going to do our reveal on our rebrand and everything.
Awesome. I'm really excited to see what's coming and watching the growth that's happening, because you're in the early phase of a startup nonprofit, essentially. I mean, the first couple of years is really a lot of grassroots, looking for volunteers to help serve. But honestly, you're probably sitting at the kitchen table or your home office most days, just trying to plug away to get progress done while you're, taking care of your kids. supporting your husband in his career, and still try to take care of your own physical and mental well-being. How are you doing all of this? And do you have any tips for those that are listening if they're wanting to be as ambitious or creative as you?
It's definitely been a journey because I'm like a dog with a bone. I am very ambitious and I'm very passionate about Veteran Help Point, and when I do something, it's 100%, and it has been to the detriment of my marriage. And I've been a poor mother at times, and I've been a poor wife at times, and that's not who I want to be. But I'm very fortunate to have a husband that is so supportive. The good thing about finding all these resources is being able to use them. And so I have been using the resources that I've found. Chris and I have been working with, a marriage counselor. She is on Instagram, Married with Kids or Married After Kids or something like that. But she's a military spouse, stationed overseas and can work with you anywhere in the world. And it has been really, literally life-changing, just to have like an outside perspective. And then, I have gotten involved in groups that have been very supportive. And through those groups, I have somebody that worked with me on mindful meditation, and he still checks in on me. I've developed very good friendships through this nonprofit, where that's really the key, is just to build relationships and build your community, have people checking in on you, check in on other people. Everybody has something to offer, and people want to help. Like, that's what you need to remember, is people want to help. It makes people feel good to help. So let them help.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you've taken on serving your community as a way to help overcome a lot of the problems that you and your husband were facing, because it's not ignoring it, it's actually facing it. And in serving others, we're able to discover the solutions to our own problems. But unfortunately, so many people do get stuck in a repetitive mindset and stuck in their struggles. And within the military, veteran, and first responder community, often our struggles lead to death by suicide. Do you have any message of hope for somebody that is currently going through their own mental health struggle?
This, I guess, sounds silly, I think, but you've got to remember, when you feel that way, you can't trust your brain. Like, scientifically, what's happening to you is your brain and your ego are trying to protect you, and it's not serving you. And so logically, you need to remember that feeling this way is going to end, but your brain is screaming at you, telling you that it's never going to end. And the only thing you can do is put one foot in front of the other and hold on to hope, whether it's from you telling yourself or from a stranger saying that it is going to get better one day. It really, really is going to get better one day. But for right now, you cannot trust your brain. So trust somebody else whenever they say that it's going to get better.
Thank you so much for that message. And thank you for what you're doing. Where can people find and connect with you, Michelle?
Veteran Help Point, at Veteran Help Point on Instagram, support@veteranhelppoint.com is my email, and veteranhelppoint.com.
All the socials, Veteran Help Point. I love it. I am so appreciative of what you're doing. I'm looking forward to the continued growth, the events that you have coming up. It's your second annual event. So thank you so much for taking the time to be with us here on the 1 Mile, 1 Veteran podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Absolutely. And for our listeners out there, remember, you can catch the 1 Mile, 1 Veteran podcast on Reese Across America Radio. That's available on platforms like iHeartRadio, Odyssey, and the TuneIn app.